say that. So,
well, you bring up a great point about preservation. So the ancients always used clay and pottery as a way to store.
It was all they had. It was all they had. That was pretty much it. Yeah.
And if you think about it, in many ways, those porous surfaces on the inside was basically like a mucosal lining that was probably sealing up the ability for the oxidization coming from the outside. Because let's face it, if you put water in a clay pot, eventually that water is going to leach back out. But where you're not getting those kinds of issues in a liquid that is not perhaps as pure as water, would then actually gum up those pockets and create this protection layer from letting it escape and preserving it for thousands of years. I mean, come on, what was the thing that they found most recently? Some kind of jug of oil that they think is like 5,000 years old or something. I was reading it in my feed.
Yeah, like so all oils that like, so for example, like one thing most people don't know, like olive oil goes bad. So after a while, like it's no longer good as a cooking oil, but it's great as like a lubricant or as a lamp oil light, right? For example, like olive oil goes bad because usually a lot of the organic compounds, aromatic compounds, which lead to the flavor, they go rancid, like they putrefy, or maybe they'll ferment. And even too with honey, right? Like understanding why honey, we can pull it out of like a tomb and it's good is because it's such a super saturated solution of not only just sugar, which will basically like salt, it'll cure stuff because it'll just literally it'll strip the water out of it due to osmosis. But even too, honey is loaded with all these like proteins and different kind of plant residues and all these phytochemical residues from the process of like the bees fermenting it in their gut. And even so it's kind of crazy when you start engineering materials that may preserve things better, right? And what you lost, and that's not to say that the way we understood microbes was through pathology, through the study of disease, right? Koch kind of doing the primary doing the link between pathogen to disease through animal inoculation and histology, right? Looking at cells. Louis Pasteur with coming up with there's a certain temperature you need to heat up to resolve these different details. Like they're working within the aspect of disease, but it's been kind of an extension of like culturing them because they're pathogens and culturing them in an environment that's similar to our gut where it may be unhealthy versus other microbiologists at the time, like Sergei Winogradsky. He was like, okay, like this is good, but it's not an ecosystem. This is not how these microbes work all together and function, right? So when you look at the philosophies, and a lot of the amazing advancements now are using these columns to kind of simulate these environmental stresses. And I think even too, like, what's a lichen, right? There's a really good quote, I think, from Entangled Life where Merlin Sheldrake says lichens are where organisms converge into ecosystems and where ecosystems emerge into organisms or vice versa. But it's basically a stressful event where there forces this collaboration. Like, okay, like, we may not always work together, but shit, like this is all we got, right? And this has happened again and again and again, right? It's like your neighbor who maybe you don't talk to too often, but if he gets broken down, he helps you out because he realizes if he gets broken down, you're helping him out, right? It's kind of like we kind of, especially with COVID and kind of a lot of parasocial behavior with online and dynamics, right? Like you met people because you went outside and talked to them. You didn't have these flatland facilitating it with good intention. That's the aspect too. But yeah, it's kind of an aspect that with these biofilms and aspects, a lot of these relationships emerged by necessity. But yeah, I can, so like with lichens, think about these emergences, right? So lichen is not just a kind of frilly, brackety kind of thing, mossy looking thing on a tree, but also like we lichenized. You could even say symbiogenesis, the formation of multiple cells coming together. They were probably doing some kind of lichenization before that kind of aha moment or that event that forced that jump. So yeah, it's crazy to think about. You kind of get like very philosophical or epistemological in that way, but you want to build an intuition. Intuition helps you conceptualize, right? But also too, you should think critically, but you shouldn't abandon that intuition or that under kind of deeper conceptualization for the sake of only thinking purely by logic, right?
In the case of lichen,
yeah, go ahead.
It's also it's like stress creates this relationship, but then it also leads to the emergence of kind of the superpowers in a way, because lichens are able to produce these strong organic acids that allow them to more or less eat rocks. And that's a really, really profound and important ability in an ecosystem of, soil's nice, plant's nice, it's nice to have organic matter decompose. But if there's nothing else available, you have an organism that can literally dissolve minerals out of rocks, absorb nutrients out of the air, and then grow off of rocks and air. And, that's kind of important because if you're thinking about big picture ecological succession, like how do you go from a rock to an old growth forest, it often starts with lichen, because these are the organisms that can actually decompose and eat rocks. And then when they die, they've thus generated organic matter. Now, a little bit of organic matter from the lichen body can then become a substrate for early successional species, pioneer type plants to, with that little bit of organic matter, that little bit of water retention, they'll grow in the cracks of the rocks that were created by the lichen. And then they grow, and then they die, and their bodies turn to organic matter. And then there's a little more soil. Now, other plants that have greater nutrient requirements can grow there, and then they get bigger and they die. And then all of a sudden it builds up, and you got a whole layer of soil. And then you got plants and shrubs and trees, and eventually you have a forest or whatever the climax ecosystem is. And a lot of it derives from these symbiotic organisms that were able to survive in extremely nutrient limited, stressful environments, gaining the ability to leverage nutrients and resources out of what are otherwise very, nutrient poor diet. I'll call it that.
Hostile environments. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I got so excited when I started working with the Protea farm. So protease are one of those that would have been right after the lichen, because it literally lives in gravel, rock, in these high UV areas.
Oh yeah.
Some of them get more moisture than others, but there's
living fossils, right?
Living fucking fossils, 300 million.
They figured it out. They found a good strategy, and why change, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.